Good evening. My name is Crawford, and I just want to say thank you and welcome to another City Talk. We're here with Reverend Dr. Hatch here from Mount Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church.
Yes, sir.
All right.
That's a long one.
Okay, that's my goal. I'm completed. And we here talking about, we here also with my friend and my partner, and this just a brother that I happen to love, Pastor Moorman here. And again, my name is Crawford. I'm the pastor of United Upper Room Full Gospel Church, and I'm sitting here with some great men on the west side of Chicago here that are here to give us some information and some education about how important it is that we be conscious about not just the election, but what happened afterwards. And so on tonight, we're going to be talking about, okay, where do we go next? Where do we go from here? What we have to do as a unit. And specifically, and I'm just this type of guy. I believe that charity starts at home first. What do we do as an African American community? What do we do as an African American community first and moving forward? And I'm going to ask you, Parish Moorman, where do we go from here?
I think the first thing that we ought to do, and I want to thank you, Pastor Crawford, for taking the reins. The thing is that we ought to first off, when you talk about coming together in our communities, first our community has to get back to the point of understanding and being proud that we have an African American president and realizing that we ought to come back together to do what we need to do. If we can come together to elect him, we can come together to make our communities better. And I think the first place we ought to start is the foundation of being proud of who we are as African Americans.
Yeah, well, thank you. And that's a good start. And being proud of who we are has to start first by knowing who we are. It's difficult to be proud of someone that we don't even know who we are. So, Pastor Hatch, can you give us a explanation of why should we be concerned about who we are first? That how important that initial point is.
Well, like Pastor Moorman is saying, we have to understand, who we are and who we are in the world. You look at the election again. The president won with 39% of the white vote.
Yeah,
39%. 95% of the African American vote. 71% of the Hispanic vote. 65% of the Asian vote. Which means that he won with a minority of the white people voting for. And so that ought to give us some clue as to who we really are. We elect presidents.
right.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, and that ought to be empowering right there. And then the sense of responsibility that comes along with that.
But I think, and if I may, Pastor Crawford, I think the key thing that you said there was a sense of responsibility. And we have a responsibility now as we have an African American president. Now, I have to admit, when he was elected in 2008, he was a rock star. He was fresh, he was new, he was different. And when he ran then, he was a rock star. Everywhere he went, he drew thousands of people. I don't care if it was in this country, whatever country he went to, he drew thousands of people. So it was the momentum we had, and I call it a rock star mentality because that's what he was. When you have thousands of people meeting you at the airport just to get a glimpse of you, you're a rock star. But then this time around in 2012, it was more of what he accomplished between 2008 and 2012. And see, a lot of times what people begin to look at then in this election, even at 39%, I'm glad it wasn't, I hope that 47% joined us too. That 39% began to look at, hey, this guy did something. This guy he's not just African American, he's a thinker. And that's one thing that our president is, he's a thinker. This time he won on his record. He just didn't win because he was an African American. He won on his record.
Well, the thing, and that's true. And what is so concerning to myself and the other colleagues that I talk with is how I remember my mother used to tell me a long time ago, and they was from the South, and they said stuff like, oh, he ain't nothing but a tea bag, And I was like, it took me years to figure what do you mean by tea bag? Well, a tea bag only shows its flavor when they put in hot water.
Mm.
So when I'm in hot water, I really excel. You know,
Mm.
you
Right,
say,
right.
oh, we don't have to bust out the stitching cord.
Right.
Hot water, I'm with excel. The people remind me of the tea bag syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
It was only when we got in trouble with this race, because this race here really woke up a lot of people's mind. Because remember, they went to sleep on the when the House when they voted for the House after they got the president in. They went to sleep in 2010. They went to sleep. But something about the ideology of the Romney kind of woke people up and reminded them, what are we going to get into?
Mm-hmm.
That boiled the hot water in people, and people came out in droves. I'm talking about waiting for hours to vote. Remind me of the South African vote. They were there. They like, look, I'm not going nowhere. I don't care what people say. They changed my precinct. I'm going over there to vote. And people really have this sense of strength and sense of power that but it only displayed when we're in hot water. Can you help us?
I want to use that tea bag and act like I thought of it in a few weeks.
Go ahead. That's good. The mother gave it to me free.
But you're exactly right. You know, in this election, I think the white vote totals were down 10% from 2008. The African American vote totals were actually up 4%. Because the water was hot, and you know the Republican strategy of suppressing the black vote actually backfired. It's almost like, you know, people may not have been excited about voting, but you tried to take it away.
Right.
Or you tried to stop me. Or in Florida, you tried to cut the days of early voting down, affect my vote. Or you tried to, you know, make people have to show up with an ID in order to suppress the vote. It had the opposite effect.
Right.
And it's like you said, I mean, people saw the stark reality. And I mean, that's something in terms of, again, talking about who we are. Maybe we're not as asleep as people think we are.
Absolutely.
Because that is something that just really did happen. Black people voted in a higher percentage than white people in that election.
And that leads me right into how do we continue that going forward with motivating black people, motivating the people.
How we put a fire.
How do we continue to do that? I remember you was making mention in the earlier interview how, you know, as pastors we do it every Sunday. We try to, you know, spark fire. You know, so how can we collectively come up with a way to where so we could constantly remind people? Because it was a dangerous thing that I was hearing pastors telling they people not to vote because of opinion that Barack Obama said that we disagreed with. And but to go to the extreme to say don't utilize or exercise your right to vote, not a privilege but a right to vote. Where you're standing on the shoulders of those who were being, they got bitten by German shepherds. They got hosed down by the Chicago Fire Department. They got beat down by the Chicago Police Department. And all throughout the nation, people have went through this suffering just to vote. And you have the audacity to say, don't vote. How do we motivate ourselves as collectively to keep the fire up under the people without asking them to take their rights or without getting in conflict with those who think that it was a good move to tell the congregation not to vote? How do we do that?
Well, you know, I think, you know, you bring up a good point. You know, it's critical, the responsibility of leadership. You know, when you mentioned the, you know, pastors telling the people not to vote, it reminded me of an old quote from Bonhoeffer when he went on the radio during when the Nazis took over Germany, and he challenged the leadership and said there's a point when the leaders become the misleaders. And so, you know, leadership carries awesome responsibility. I think one of the things we have to do is we got to figure out a way to organize ourselves in such a way, I mean, nationally and even locally as African Americans, as a community, not taking anything away from other communities, but we need a set of policy agenda items that we need to have as measures of how much we're getting for our vote. You know, to hold everybody accountable, including the president. For example, in this town, I was with him today, a friend of mine, you know, Juan Delgado. He's the executive director of the Latino Policy Institute. So even here in Chicago, in the same way that Latinos are organized nationally, they don't agree about everything. I mean, they're not really together. They just come together around certain things. So, you know, if you're going to run in the Hispanic community, I don't care if everything from dog catcher to presidency, are you for the DREAM Act?
Right.
I mean, they got a set of policy positions. And I think that we're going to have that same kind of, whether we organize a policy institute. You know, I've had some conversations with people. Again, it's very difficult because people try to control our leadership development.
Right.
It becomes very difficult, but we have to fight. You know, for example, anybody that's really going to be in favor of our community going to have to fight for full funding of public education.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, in this country, you know, the demographics are changing. The majority of the students in public schools in America are Black and brown now. In public schools across the board. So public education funding. The other piece, you know, of course, reviving this economy where people can work, you know, jobs. We bailed out the banks, but we left the American homeowner out to dry. Left their houses underwater.
Yeah.
So how can you get equity back in these homes? Principal reduction. The president, you knew the president was going through some process of self-discovery. He was not Wall Street's favorite guy anymore.
Right.
You know, so now we have to use that power, that mandate, to fight for the American homeowner.
Right.
To put equity back in the house, to re-empower the families. And then in our community in particular, most people talked about the Michelle Alexander book. I've talked about it. I mean, the reality is, everybody's going to see the movie Lincoln. That 13th Amendment, there was a little trickery involved in it. I mean, it was a compromise.
Right.
And if you read the amendment says there will not be involuntary servitude or slavery, except for a person duly committed of a crime. Which means if you've been duly committed of a crime, you could go back into slavery.
You have slave status.
You got slave status.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna start using that one.
Go ahead.
Teabag and slave status.
Right.
It makes the point. So then when you go from the chain gang all the way to the war on drugs, you can see how we've been re-enslaved.
Absolutely.
By using the law. But the point that I want to end there, so anybody that's actually talking about dealing with incarceration, the re-empowerment of ex-offenders, reintegration strategies, these are things that are going to deal with our peculiar place in our community, decriminalizing, you know, some of the drugs, the way that the drugs have been used, the way that three strikes you law has been used, disenfranchising voters. Voting is really a state's right.
Right.
It's not a national right.
Right.
And so there are different laws in all the 50 states. The Sentencing Project will tell you the whiter the state is, you can vote in jail. In the states where they got, you know, Mississippi, 40% Black, Georgia, Florida, if you're convicted of a crime, you can't vote.
Right.
A way of controlling Black vote. So I'm just saying education, bailing out homes, jobs, and basically dealing with the incarceration problem and setting the captives free. Those are kind of things that I think we need to set in policy formation to find out what we're really getting for our vote.
But see, if I may, Pastor,
Right.
one of the things that you said was very key, and you said it earlier in the day, is that the Hispanics have really basically developed themselves within the culture. And
Yes.
I think what we need to do in the post election is that we need to come together and start developing ourselves within our own community. Because when we look at this whole thing, they're coming after us. And you just gotta, they coming after us. As soon as Obama, his 4 years is up, they're coming after us because they actually think that he's doing it all so that we may prosper. But the thing is, he's doing it so everybody may prosper. But because of his color, is what we're dealing with. And post-election says, Texas said we don't want to be recognized with the United States no more. You got states that want to separate themselves. I love it. I want to say, I don't know what politician said it. Well, if you want to separate yourself, then that means you need a passport to go wherever you want to go because you're saying that you're no longer an American citizen. These are the things now that we're dealing with. That we got states now that want to separate themselves, which will come back during the next election, of course. But when we're dealing with this, we got to start developing ourselves within our own cultures. We got to start coming up with our own districts within our own community and governing and coming up with policies that we need that will govern that will govern our educational system, that'll govern our economy, that'll govern the politics that happen within our community. I think what we have allowed to happen is too many things happen in our community. And what I mean by is that there was a time when a Chinese or Arab or whatever, you just couldn't come in and open up a shop and say, I'm gonna start selling. Because we have sold ourselves out. Now individuals are basically moving in and doing what they want to do because we have nothing in place that says we're proud of who we are.
Well, the truth of the matter is this, is that, first of all, America, sheets has been pulled. And people are not doing anything new. They're actually doing what they always wanted to do about they thought that racism and that separatism and all of those things is brand new. I mean, it's not new. What happened is that it's just being exposed. This election, this black president and all this is just exposing all this stuff. And another thing that in order for us to move forward, we cannot depend upon the ones who colonized us in the beginning to free and liberate us. That's just not a reality. That's never going to happen. It has to come from us. We have to we have to realize that in order for us to make any movement, most movements started from offices just like this here, where people got together and collectively came with an idea and said, hey, look, this is going to work for the greater good of the people. And as far as people that are putting this propaganda out there saying that we'll never get together or we are so broken and that is not the truth. That is not the truth. We are more united as evidence of just this past this election. We are more united than anything. What happens is that we have to figure out a way to keep that fire burning. We dealing with a plethora of issues going on. We talked about the mass incarceration, and for some reason we think that it's a Democrat and a Republican, that we have to be Democrat. But when we look at those laws that you spoke on, the laws of the three strikes you out, that came up under the Clinton administration.
That's right.
When you look at the rock and the powder differences, and that is the way that they hide racism, because the rock hit the streets in the areas where African Americans are at, and the powder is on a higher level where the visual. So the disparities are so wide that it's clear that if anybody with any kind of conscious mind can be able to see that this is a racist law, that came up under the Clinton administration with all of the other issues that are coming over. And I'm not just single Clinton out, I'm just saying that how people just assume that it's a Republican and it's a Democrat. It's really both of them is really doing major damage to us.
Mhm.
We have to figure out a way to where so we can galvanize our resources and unify ourselves to the point to where so we got to keep that pot boiling so all of us can show our colors because we are doing some things that we need to do, but we just have to do it on a broader level. We have to continue to take this here thing and move it forward.
Mhm.
I got one word I'd like to put out, if I may. One word. Post.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at all this, there was the pre-election stuff.
Mhm.
Now there's the post. You know, post says, well, since Obama's president, I'm gonna have to lay some of y'all off. Since Obama's president, I'm gonna have to cut your hours. And it appears that everything that they're doing now, they're blaming
Mhm.
the president.
Propaganda.
And one of the things, and I know this ain't my show, but give me 1 thing to say it. Pastor Hatch, if somebody were to say post-election to you, what would you say?
Well, I mean, it's one thing to win an election. It's another thing to get what you deserve
Mm-hmm.
during the period of government,
Mm-hmm.
which means you can't just have an election and then go home, but you have to stay engaged in the business of politics. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it's important to, at some point soon, we need to have some semblance of a national agenda.
Okay.
I know that, Reverend Sharpton's been working. I mean, we need to get over the petty fights. For example, I know Reverend Sharpton on one hand, and then, of course, he's flying in a rarefied atmosphere. He's an advisor to the president. And then Cornel West on the other hand, who I also know. And then there's been, tension in between.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we can never really move from the spiritual.
Okay.
Because that's the only way, as smart as people are, it really takes the Holy Spirit to get to the point. It's not about you. Mm-hmm. It's not about me.
Right.
But we need to come together and agree on what's good for the people, particularly the least of these. Because at the end of the day, it's these young people, on the ground floor. It's these families who are struggling that really need to have a serious agenda for our community. So we have some measure of what we're going to get post-election.
Okay.
I mean, are we going to have some principal reduction?
Okay.
And some equity in our house, some address of the foreclosures.
Right.
Are we going to have more money and innovations for public education?
Okay.
Are we going to have more African American teachers? I mean, that's a major issue in Chicago. Nobody's addressing.
Right.
Only 2% of the teachers in public schools are African American males.
Didn't it used to be larger once before?
Oh yeah. Well, one of the things going on in Chicago. I mean, if we're not careful, people are talking about education reform, but these almost become jobs for young white kids coming out of college. A lot of these older black teachers are being pushed off the scene and then kind of, deemed antiquated and old. But I mean, at the end of the day, nobody can save us for us but us. I mean, you really need African American teachers in African American schools, not because they're the only ones that can teach, but I mean, at some point, at least in elementary schools, you have to have role models, people who, have a passion, people who are part of the community, part of the families, part of their faith and religious community life. And so, I mean, again, schools and incarcerate, what bill decriminalizing or addressing the disparity between the rock and the powder, and just application of the law. I mean, if you really want to just have a successful raid on illegal drugs, you could go to any major college campus with a bunch of white kids. Shut down the dorm. Like they used to do the project.
Right.
And I promise you'll get a boatload of people who are breaking the law. And so this misapplication of the law when, Negroes go to jail on the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And then but over at Northwestern, University of Chicago, they're smoking the same weed and tooting the same cocaine. I mean,
Yeah.
So that whole way that the law has been misused for mass incarceration of black people.
Right.
We need a address of these issues and we need a set of policy position. We could really formulate it into about 5 major pieces. And then we'd have a measure of what are we really getting post-election.
Right.
Besides a good feeling.
A good feeling.
And a celebration.
And that's it. And then it's all over in a day or two.
And didn't we win though? I promise you the Hispanics are going to get immigration reform.
Yeah.
They're going to get it now.
They're going to get it. Yeah.
They're going to get it.
For their votes.
Mm-hmm.
And the Republicans going to cooperate.
Yeah. Yes, they are.
Because they're going to see if they can try to shake some of those votes loose.
And if it ain't nothing for that purpose only, they're going to push that. And it's not about people being, cared for. They don't really care for the people. What we have to do is that we have to care and take care of our children. My question is how, with all the information that we have, what steps do we take, for lay people? What steps do we take to educate them and enlighten them on civics, enlighten them on just the due process, because some people go, I've been working with the youth for like the last 5-8 years, and most of them are back and forth in jail. And we had to pause to teach them the just due process from the time of being arrested. What do you say? How do you respond? First thing that your life is on the line.
Right.
We have to talk a certain way. We have to, even our body gestures have to, we can't jump on the phone talking about we calling somebody.
Right.
People get shot from being on the phone. So we have to begin to educate our congregation, our people, our lay people from the beginning, from the time that you have an encounter with the police, all the way through the arrest, the interrogation, the preliminary hearing, and then to the trial itself. What steps do we take? Because what happens is this is how they tricking a whole lot of people. First, they overcharge them. Prosecutors overcharge them during the interrogation, and then once they come to the preliminary hearing, after the preliminary hearing, they get they find probable cause or whatever to move forward to the grand jury. And then once they get to that state, then they give the plea bargain. They say, well, listen, if you don't take this plea bargain, you're looking at 20 years. 17, 18-year-old kids looking at 20 years, that's a lifetime to them. They say, but if you sign now, we're going to let you go with 3 years. Now, you have 8 months in. And so if you give us another 8, or if you go down and dress out 61 days, they get billed for the whole year with the 61 days. And they're thinking like, wow, it's better for me to take this. This is like a good deal. But then they put them on the parole or probation, and they put these stipulations on them, which is the ball and the chain that snags them every time to take back. And the recidivism is sky high. So it's designed to keep people in there. So what do we do at that level? How do we strategically at that level execute that information out there so our people can be more enlightened, where parents can teach their sons and their daughters? What do you do from point A to point B?
Well, I think if we look at it, I got to go back to the concept that the devil tricked us. The devil tricked us. He really did. What he got us to do was look at the young boy with his pants sagging. We focused on him. Pull your pants up, boy. Pull your pants up. While he was killing off that senior man, 60, 70 years old, that would grab that middle adult man and say, come here, don't treat that woman like that. Come here, you ain't got no business. Guidance. And that 60-year-old man would guide that young man in his 30s and his 40s and then he had something to pass down. What has happened is that that senior man, that deacon that used to sit on the front row, that nobody paid attention to, that died off silently. We had his funeral, and he was giving guidance to the young man that was 30, 40 years old. Where do we start? Is that we got to get our senior men back involved. That now they got something to give that adult man that's in the middle, that he may pass it down to that teenager, that young man, so that he would have something to look forward to, wisdom, knowledge, and he look. Because when I was growing up, everything started with my grandfather. So the point you wanted to get to was to get to my uncle's status, where he would be able to sit and talk with who? My grandfather. That's the status. Right now, they just like the adult man is wandering around with nothing because he ain't got no knowledge. He ain't got nothing to pass down. So what has happened is we got to get back to the senior man in post-election, standing up, taking that position that says, young man, I'm going to teach you a few things that you can pass down. But we don't have that in our culture anymore. Now, understand what I'm saying. Post-election says we got to get back to what made us strong. And that senior man made us strong. That senior big mama made us strong. And we got to get to the point to whereas we got to come back together as a culture. It's that's where we start. If we start anywhere, because the celebration getting ready to end. That good feeling getting ready to end. Because Obama only got 4 years. So the thing is, what do we do after that? The Hispanics already got a plan. They got policy. They got policy, national policy teams. Mm-hmm. They got districts inside of a district that governs education. We got to get to the point where now we got to start preparing ourselves for post-Obama era. His 8 years is getting ready to end. We better prosper right now and start getting ourselves together where we're starting to govern our own education, where we're starting to govern our communities, and quit looking for somebody to come in and do it for us. Because that senior man wouldn't let a white man come in and tell a young black man what to tell another young black man. That senior man took that responsibility at the church. Come here, young man. You ain't got no business treating that young girl like that. Come here. We don't have that anymore. So what we got to get over is the fear that has paralyzed our community. And we've allowed the young man to paralyze our community. We got to get back to the point to whereas what made us strong will keep us strong. Pilgrim Village. Isn't that what it says out there?
That's right.
Pilgrim Village. We're here to help build a village. Pilgrim Village. All churches ought to be St. Joe's Village. Matter of fact, I'm getting ready to take that concept on. Because everything around that church ought to be a village. Raising and taking care of one another. That's what we got to get back to, Pastor.
Thank you. Thank you. What's your take on what do we have to get back to pull out, to enlighten our children on what they do from point A of their first arrest or encounter with a police or any official authority to all the way to the time in the penitentiary? What do we do through that process to educate them so that we can prevent some of them from going into this mass incarceration? Mm-hmm. Now we can take it from a legislation level, we can take it from federal, local, state, we can take it from any one level, but give us some information on what do we do to prevent our youth from getting to this penitentiary from the point of entry of the authority, the police they come in contact with.
Now I think the pastor's on the point, Pastor Moorman, we have to, of course, give guidance to young people, just as you said. NAACP, they had a little piece a few years ago that they had a pamphlet on what to do if you have an encounter with the police. I mean, the way you expressed it is just a way that us older guys have to talk to younger men. You know, it's something about our kind of machismo, and that really is irrational.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's people who are don't really have that much going on, kind of exaggerate their machismo. You know, they don't talk to me. Well, really, I mean, a male cannot afford to encounter the police like that.
Right.
I mean, I've taught my own sons, you know, they may take some lip off of a female, but every encounter with the police is a potential execution.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, it just is. And so you really have to be thinking. You can't afford to be irrational. And so, you know, some of us pastors have been under we had an African American Superintendent, Terry Hillard, and he was good enough to kind of have pastors come in to the police academy and give us some insight on what that encounter looks like with the police and the whole ratcheting up to deadly force. Like there's no such thing for a police officer to shoot to wound anybody. It's deadly force.
Right.
Right.
So whenever they shoot, it's designed to kill the offender. And so you know, anytime you allow a situation to ratchet up, then it may be your last situation. Because as you mentioned, the cell phone, the only thing the cop has to prove is I had reason to be afraid for my life. I thought it was a gun.
Right.
I didn't know he was just reaching for the cell phone.
Right.
You know, and I had reason to believe that maybe it might have been, but I didn't have time. It was either, you know, risking my life or their life for me to try to figure out, is that a phone or a gun they're reaching for? And so we have to, you know, like I said, the NAACP, they had a little campaign for a while. That's got to be a major part of our community, really how to survive and navigate. You know, the police in our communities are still a occupying force, you know, and so even in Chicago, you know, the police don't reflect the general population.
No. No, they don't.
And so it's, you know, it's wisdom. Maybe we might have to have some campaign like the NAACP had, something that is very intentional. We're going to have to figure out a way to re-empower some of these organizations. You know, if it's not going to be pushed or if it is going to be pushed.
Right.
Is it going to be the Urban League or not the Urban League that we don't really control necessarily? We don't at least pay for it. National Action Network, that's something Sharp and, you know, kind of got for him. Was it a round table of all these groups? But at some point, we're going to have something with a little cohesion so that we can begin to address things in a systematic way. So we're going to deal with the way we encounter the criminal justice system. Then that's a campaign.
Right.
And get some good information out there. Tell guys like us what our responsibility would be in terms of educating young men. Are we going to do it from the church standpoint? Do that systematically. Because I know that I didn't always know it. No. I mean, I could have got blown away quite a few times as a young man growing up, you know, mouthing off at the police because I just didn't really know.
Right.
But in older guys, you know, it could have been your dad, could have been guys in the neighborhood. I mean, somebody to get your attention and tell you the kind of danger that you're in. And whatever constitutional rights you think you got, you know, when you dead, number one, you ain't around to tell your version of the events.
Right.
And the police is clear on that.
Right.
You know, they're very clear on that. You run around with your pants down and you running for the police. You know how many brothers been killed just trying to pull their pants up? But see, I didn't know you was pulling your pants up. I thought you reached for something.
Right.
While you were running. And then since you didn't really have nothing, well, then that's why I'm carrying this extra gun. Then I'm finna drop by you.
Right.
You know, my drop gun. And man, it happens just like that.
That's good. That's good stuff. You know, and it's important to be able to understand how. And I remember again, like in your interview, you was talking about, you know, the best way to control people is divide and conquer. And there is a transparent divide line that's between the west and the south side. You know, I remember last summer, a friend of mine, we were at motorcycles, and she died, and her family wanted me to utilize the body. And she wanted she asked this church, they accepted, huge church, name I'm just going to leave anonymous, and they asked, he said, sure, you can have funeral here, and we'll take care of everything, and that's what we're here for. And the mother said, insisted that I utilize the services, and she was like, just he's going to get a call, and the preacher of this church is going to call and talk to you. So he called him, and he's talking to me, and he's screaming to me about my qualifications, and who's my bishop, and things. So I'm giving him the information. He said, well, I don't see you on the internet, and you don't have a big this, that, and I explained to him, I said, hey, I'm not on the internet. I've been ministering to this family for the last 10 years, and they asked me to do it.
Right.
And one statement that really got my attention, he said, well, the reason why I got to take you through all this, because you know how you West Side preachers are. And I'm like, no, I don't. I actually don't know how are we? And then he kind of recanted from making that statement, And so the thing was alarming to me is that there is a separatism that's going on between the South Side and the West Side. You see, I'm originally, this is my neighborhood. I'm born and raised right here, but I live on the South Side now. And
you left us.
No. I started a recovery line over there.
Okay.
And so I went on the South Side, and people actually think I'm from the South Side, so they openly talk about the West Side and the differences, And so what I think is that we have to really kind of remove those barriers, those invisible barriers from these different sides of town, because what I look at is hurt on the West Side is the same hurt on the South Side. When I look at the hurt in the Garfield, now they didn't separate from West Garfield, East Garfield. This was the West Side of Chicago, and there's a pain that's here on the West Side of Chicago that you can feel the undertones of that, and you can feel the same vibes on the South Side. And at some point we're going to have to remove that division in order for us to work together, so we can start this healing process, because we got to come together on an agenda that's going to supersede a South Side or West Side. When we look at people that look like us, that removes the different sides of town. So, Paris, I want to ask you, what steps can we take as clergy to unify? Because we asking. I mean, look at we asking all these different. We got different diversities in the African American community. All African Americans don't think alike. They separated by education. They got different classes. They got different economics. They got different. African Americans are not just African Americans. They are a whole lot of stuff.
When you ask the question, what's it going to take? I think we got to go back in our history to understand it's going to take more than breaking down a barrier between the West Side and the South Side and the North Side and the East Side. I think if we look back in the history of the breakup of the African American church, period, one of the things I learned in the history of the Baptist church, a lot of things were spent off because of disagreements. And through those disagreements, we found that a lot of times money was involved. So if we can get past the point of money and understand that money really has no value beyond the point you get ready to use it and the status that you want to have, because when you die, your money can't go with you. But if we begin to pool together our resources that we have, I think that's the first thing that will break the barriers, because we spend over $800 billion a year in other people's communities simply to prove who we are, status one person over another. So when we look at this whole thing, we have to get to the point, and I keep looking at faith, hope to win the future. The faith and hope to win the future is that we got to look past where we want to be and be what God wants us to be, because God never intended for us to be separated. Now, the bottom line is is we can go out in the community and get more people to work with us than we can in the church. Because you got to remember, Jesus had more problem with people in the church than he had outside the church. So when we look at this thing, God is saying that we got to look past who we think we are in the church and begin to develop who he wants us to be outside of the church. The dividing line is resources. If we can pull our resources together and quit thinking that one person ought to have more status than the next. Because the bottom line is, in that great day, the preacher, whoever, is going to say, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. They don't care if you die with $1 million or with $1. It's all the same. If we quit looking at the value of the dollar and start looking at the value of the people that God has put in our care, because the people follow the leader. If the leader think he's better than people, then guess who else gonna think they're better? The people. Which in turn, Reverend, why we going over to this church? Ooh, look at the neighborhood. But in actuality, what they forget is that a lot of churches were broke down and didn't have nothing. But they all knew how to come together when it was time to do what was needed done for the community.
Thank you. That was right. You made a lot of points. And Dr. Hatch, I want you to elaborate on, what steps do we take to dismantle that wall so we can begin to move forward in this post-election era?
Between the west side and the south
West
side
side and south side.
That's deep, isn't it?
It's a deep cut.
I know a lot of people. I saw he swim around.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to confront it because it is a reality. It is our reality because I would not have known how much that impacts policy had not I experienced it myself. And when I experienced it myself, I like I say, I've been involved in the West Side Ministers Coalition over here. I've been involved with the Faith Incorporated with my cousin Reverend Crawford, and a lot of ministers come here. But then when we go on the south side, it's like we are in, we have crossed our boundaries. We are in, dangerous territory, and it's like we supposed to come in. We need to come in together to fight a greater force, but there is something there that's separating us with this here force. Now, I know that it's by design. I know it's by design. From you have the mayor and you have the leadership of Chicago that keeps us separate, so we won't get on one accord. But what do we do as individuals, as pastors, as clergy, as lay? What steps do we take to dismantle, or make a beginning dismantling, or do we need to even address it at all?
I think we have to address it for the reason you stated. I mean, it's used against us, the division, and used to disempower us by keeping us divided. And one of the things I've tried to do is to break down some of those barriers and the stereotypes. The history of it, of course, is the South Side is much larger than the West Side in terms of population base. I mean, it might be 4 or 5 to 1, 6 to 1, including the suburbs. This is more Negroes live south and southern suburbs. It's a dynamic community. It is. It's probably one of the most dynamic communities of Africans in the diaspora in the world. I mean, it literally produced the first congressman since Reconstruction in all of America, Oscar Dupree's, in 1928. It produced Barack Obama. It's his base. It's where his house is. Right. So, Minister Farrakhan lives there. Elijah Muhammad lived there. Jesse Jackson moved to Chicago and discovered that base and never left. It founded Jet and Ebony magazine. It founded Soft Sheen products. So it's not a comparison between. I mean, West Side represents the more newly settled migrants from the South. It feels a little more country. It's not quite as urbane. And so, you've had all of that, like you talked about class as one of the divisions, and that's been one of the divisions between the West Side and the South Side. West Side seems like a lower class of people. And so, you know, those divisions are used to divide Black Chicago because, you know, the West Side really has, uh, it can empower all of Black Chicago when West and South is together. And it's one community, and therefore, you know, our power is increased. And so our division decreases our power. I've tried to build barriers. I mean, I've been told, you know, man, with your gifts, if you was just on the South Side, you would really clean up. You know, you could really emerge. But you know, to some extent, I've chosen to be here, maybe to break some of the barriers, stereotypes. So I've had all kind of people at my church, and just really trying to build bridges and to kind of take the whole conversation to a higher level than division of sides. You know, the West Side has a lot of assets that people live on the South Side will never know. You know, Oak Park is right next to Austin. Oak Park is the home of Ernest Hemingway, Frank Lloyd Wright homes. You know, before bookstores went out of style, we had 3 bookstores in walking distance in downtown Oak Park, which is really the West Side. Every restaurant you can imagine is actually a more literate community, more dynamic, just as dynamic as Hyde Park and Evanston. 2 major universities on the West Side.
On the West Side,
including the University of Illinois, which would give us 3, Concordia, Dominican. And so it's pretty diverse, racially diverse. And so we have to educate people. You know, I've got a pretty famous attorney guys in my church. I won't say his name. Well, I will say his name, Lou Myers. He lives in East Garfield Park. And I knew he just didn't know. He lived over here for a couple of years or so. I said, Lou, let me show you the West Side. So I took him down, you know, back off and all that. Then we went across Austin and Oak Park. And I bump into him and his wife all the time, just in Oak Park. Going to the Japanese restaurant one week, the Italian restaurant the next week, the movie theater down on Lake Street. Just, you know, the stereotype is not true. Gail Wood, you know, tremendous new kind of African American middle class community. And so we have to get good information. It really is just one, we're really one community in Chicago. And that whole division, to be honest, is really ignorant. You know, just people wanting to make themselves feel better, to feel better than other people when, you know, really our unity is where we would get our strength.
Good. Yeah, because I see that a lot of times is that, and my mother used to break this concept down for me. She'd say, anytime somebody put you down and make themselves feel good.
You know who was the last politician that really got it?
Who that?
Harold
Harold
Washington.
Washington. And
let me tell you what he did to show he got it. Just who was his police chief? What's the brother's name? I can't remember. Leroy Martin.
Leroy Martin. Yeah, I remember Leroy Martin.
Was from the West Side.
West Side.
And don't you know, West Side Black people took note of that? That Harold Washington regarded and respected us.
Yeah, being from the South.
And then, you know, the only way he was not going to be mayor was to die. Man, they had the winning coalition. And you know, you all live on the West Side. West Side people didn't consider Harold Washington a South Side with a bias against the West Side.
Harold Washington was the man that unified.
I mean, but he made appointments. You know, he brought Nancy Jefferson on his team. She's like a godmother of the West Side. He was the last real kind of South Side politician that really got it. You know, the South Side was his base. But he knew the winning combination. Once you unify Black Chicago and you reach out to the Hispanic community, and you had the white liberals on the lakefront, when he won the second time, I distinctly remember Jane Byrne said, you know, everybody just needed cash in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, George Dunn folded over.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, he's the man for life.
Mm-hmm.
He's the man for life.
Mm-hmm.
We just didn't know how short his life was going to be.
Right.
But after he won the second time, she said that's the end of the ball game. Because he was going to only just add on more people in this coalition, the Polish people and the da-da-da. But that unity between the Black West and the South Side,
He got it together.
He had a base. He just didn't need that much more to ever win.
Amen.
And so, you know, it's a good illustration just how critical it is and how that division has really got to be very intentional, how people keep us divided. And nobody really should proudly feed into that ignorance, you know. The West Side, oh man, over there.
Yeah.
And that's why I choose to be over here because, you know, my point is, I mean, number one, I was born on the West Side. But, I mean, I don't think there's no Negro preacher bigger than me. I mean, I have more members, you know, but my point is that we got greatness all over our community.
It's definitely there, you know, and again, like I said, when I you know, when the Spirit led me to go to follow my calling, I went to, you know, I was sitting here and I would listen to you. I remember, you might not remember, but we was at the John Marshall Law School HIV and AIDS panel.
Okay.
And we were addressing HIV and AIDS, and the individual came in there and tried to adjust, take over the conversation by bringing homosexuality into the HIV and AIDS, and saying that, look, you can't talk about HIV and AIDS without respecting and addressing the homosexuality. And one of the members, one of the board members there, opened up the Bible and said, we're not even talking about this, but since you mentioned it, this is what the scripture says about this, that, and the other. Now let us get to the disease of HIV and AIDS so we can continue to heal our people. And I remember you that was on that board. And that's how far back I've been on the battlefield. And when I look at the different approaches and the different priests, I listened to what you said. I sat up under you for a while. You had an African a sister that used to go here. I think she moved back to Africa. She used to say, you got to listen to this man. You know?
I remember the sister,
Yeah, and she brought me here. Fuller was here.
Greg
Fuller here.
Yeah,
I pulled him in at Haymarket to here. So I was here.
Wife,
yeah.
He got married.
He got married here, yeah. But he met her down there. And I went out to Winston. I went out to Brazier, and I went there. God set me up under Jeremiah Rack, you know, because I was struggling with the culture. You know, why is it that everybody I'm talking to telling me that culture is not important, but yet I'm feeling this sense that it's needed to be in there. And God set me up under Jeremiah Rack, and He taught me the culture. He was able to put Africans back into the Bible and gave me all of this information. And as we studied up under him, we went into the ministers and training program, and they had a satellite program from the Virginia Union. And I sat up under that, and we was just getting fed with this information. I said, as soon as I get a chance, I'm taking this back to the West Side. And I'm talking about it was school.
They just had their graduation here. Dr. Alan Bozak from South Africa. He preached here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I got to get back to that because I was called to a church right here on the west side of Chicago.
You're doing a show.
Oh, yeah. Oh. So I was called over here to the west side to bring that information back. And again, it's connecting to what we're saying, how important it is for us to be able to understand the different diversities and make the necessary steps so we can make this transformation to dismantle the separation in order for us to unify, to come up under that agenda again that was successful during the Harold Washington eras. And I know we kind of like winding down in time. And so I just want to ask this last question, you know, how do we, what steps do we make? What is one of the first things that we do? I know we have a lot of things to do. What's the first step that we make as leaders, pastors, clergy, and men in this post-election era? What's the first?
Well, we need a summit of black leadership locally and then nationally. And we got to figure out who leaders are. That's tough. You know, I don't have the answer to that. That's a collective conversation, but we're going to have those summit meetings where we at least, have the expertise around the table to begin to bring out the 4 or 5 policy positions that'll give us the ability to measure whether or not we're getting anything for our political participation. And not only holding the president accountable, but I think, Dr. Moorman has been most profound, and it would just be intelligent of us to start right now, if we haven't already, thinking post-Obama. I mean, the beauty of politics, a lot of people find it distasteful, but where it really helps you once you engage in this political process. I mean, and I love this social media stuff because I'm political science. I was watching elections since I was 10 years old.
Okay.
I'm absolutely just thrilled watching black people on Facebook and all the social media organs now. People are so political. Right. They talk about electoral college. Do you know how new that is? For common people to be talking about electoral college. Yeah. That's just since Obama been in there. And back to Pastor Moorman's point, right after President Obama won, I'm talking about the night he won. See, the beauty of people becoming political is so intelligent. Everybody started talking about 2016. Right. Yeah. See, because politics never stop. Right. And the power of what Pastor's saying is, if we're going to be intelligent in leadership, our people, we got to start thinking now. What is the direction for our community? Because you may not have a black president for a while. Right. That's right. Post-Obama, what direction are people going in? That's why we have policy positions. So it doesn't matter who's in there. These would be our permanent interests. If it's public education, again, if it's dealing with mass incarceration, if it's the wealth of black families, beginning with home ownership and restoring the equity that was in it, and the wealth that has been lost, and jobs and economic development in our communities. What are those policy positions? What do we need? We need a summit locally and nationally on that yesterday.
Thank you. And as we conclude this here session, I want to just thank each and every one of you for being patient with us, because, when you sit next to the caliber of Dr. Hatch, you just have to allow him to elaborate on so much information that I sat here again as a student, and I had to get a tap and say, "Hey man, you're being interviewed." Get some information. It's a good thing, and it's a pleasure to be here. And in closing, we're going to ask that you pray us out.
All right. Well, thank you again. I want to thank you, Pastor Crawford. Thank you, Pastor Moorman, for allowing us to be a part, and thank the audience for tuning in. And we can't do anything without God. Right. With him, everything is possible. So God, we thank you and we praise you for this time of sharing. We thank you for letting us be alive and then bringing us into the kingdom. Yes. For such a time as this. Now you fixed us and you fitted us. Yes. To make a contribution while we're here. Now give us the boldness, the courage, the insight, the wisdom. We pray for unity among our leadership. Yes. Locally and nationally. Yes. Give the leaders hearts for the people. Let them remember, oh God, that all of us have been blessed. It's not about us, but it's about the least of these. And as we've done unto the least, so we do it unto you. So we remember the young people, the children today, the vulnerable, the fatherless. We remember the widows. We remember the seniors. We remember the sick and the afflicted. We thank you
Thank you.
for the expanded health care,
Yes,
for Affordable Health Care Act, for
Yes,
Obamacare. We thank you for that.
Thank you, Lord.
And then
Thank
for that, the victory being
Yes.
preserving that progress
you. Yes, sir.
that has been
Yes.
made in our society. And so use us for your glory. Pray a special blessing on the president
Yes, sir.
and his family, and you protect him. Let the blood of Jesus cover him. Now we
Yes.
thank you for all you've done, all you're doing, and all you will do, and we claim victory over every obstacle of the enemy in Jesus' name. Amen. And bless you.
Amen.
Bless you.
Amen.
All right. Bless
Bless
you.
you.
All right.
That's
That's
Bless you,
good.
Pastor. All right.
man.
All right.
These
All
things
right.
are
Here we
getting
go.
better and better.